In the heart of Chicago, where store windows shine brighter than the eyes of passers-by, an 11-year-old girl stood out like a rare gem. While hurried adults strutted by in designer clothes, discussing investments and deals, Leia held a box of cookies as if clutching her own destiny. The worn coat she wore told more about her life than any words ever could. This wasn't just about selling sweets, it was about trying, once again, to fit the impossible into childhood. Many glanced her way and quickly looked away, as if she weren't even there. She had chosen the wrong place by the world's standards, but maybe it was the only place where real change could happen. Instead of a neighborhood fair or a school gate, Leia dared to face the giants, fueled by the courage of someone who already knew life doesn't wait. Most kids her age thought about games, parties, birthdays. But she was already calculating, how many cookies would she need to sell to help pay the overdue rent? How would she explain to her mother that no one wanted to buy? Her mature gaze wasn't an accident, it was a reflection of the daily battle she fought. Some people said she was a nuisance, that this wasn't a child's place. But sometimes, it's in the places no one expects us that the real story begins. Leia had no spotlight, but she had urgency. She didn't know it yet, but right there, between expensive shoes and indifferent stares, something was about to happen that would change everything. He arrived surrounded by bodyguards, his steps demanding space, his eyes trained to ignore anything that didn't glitter. Brett Langston was the kind of man who confused power with human worth. When he saw Leia, with her little cookie boxes and worn shoes, he didn't see a child, he saw an inconvenience, a flaw in the luxury scene he so prized. Without hesitation, he mocked her clothes and laughed at the idea of selling cookies there. The laughter of others followed fast and cruel. But what no one expected was her reaction. Instead of crying or running away, Leia looked him in the eye and said, with a firmness few adults could match, "You may have everything, but you don't know what it really means to need." And in that moment, the entire room went silent. It was as if time had stopped. Not because of the volume of her voice, but because of the undeniable truth her words carried. A lone, unseen child had just brought a billionaire to his knees, without yelling, without cursing, without losing her calm. Some laughed nervously, others pretended to check their phones. But the impact lingered in the air. There was something deeply uncomfortable about her honesty. It was as if that girl had held up a mirror to everyone. A mirror showing how quick we are to judge and slow to truly see. And there, in that silent tension, something began to change. Not just in Brett, but in everyone around. Behind that shy smile was a plan. Leia wasn't there by chance. She knew exactly where she was stepping, which brands would be at the event, and what kind of people she'd face. Instead of asking for help or waiting on luck, she mapped her route. She researched the address, noted the schedules, and prepared everything by herself. She baked the cookies in an oven lent by the neighbor on the 4th floor, who used the communal kitchen as an extension of her heart. Leia wasn't just selling cookies, she was selling strategy, she was selling effort. And the most beautiful thing was she never wanted pity. She hated when someone offered money, without taking anything. She always politely but firmly replied, "This isn't charity. This is a sale." It wasn't about getting something easy, it was about earning it. And maybe that's why her presence was so unsettling. While many adults saw a lost child, she saw herself as a provider. Someone who had to fight to keep the light on, the fridge stocked with milk, and her mother hopeful. That attitude, by the way, taught more about dignity than any motivational speech. Because in the end, it wasn't just about what she said. It was about how she carried herself, how she insisted on being seen as capable, even at such a young age. Leia already understood something many adults are still trying to grasp. True value isn't in what you have, but in what you do with the little you have. And that quiet strength began to infect those willing to really look. That night, someone in the back of the hall recorded everything. A short video, poorly framed, with slightly muffled audio, but with something impossible to ignore, the steady voice of a girl standing up to a powerful man. Within hours, the video went viral. It wasn't just shared by anonymous internet users, but by journalists, artists, athletes, and even politicians. What moved people most wasn't the confrontation itself, but Leia's calm in the face of arrogance. She didn't humiliate, she simply revealed. Soon, social media flooded with messages of support. An award-winning actress shared the video saying, "This girl taught me more about courage than many adults in leadership roles." A famous TV host launched a campaign, "Buy Leia's Cookies," and thousands followed suit. But the most beautiful part was the wave of children joining in. Small videos appeared of boys and girls holding signs, "I'm just like Leia." It was as if suddenly the whole world saw what she always was. And it wasn't just support. Invitations, interviews, and offers arrived. But the most symbolic change wasn't what you saw on screens. It was the silent shift in how people looked at kids like her. Leia became a symbol not because she wanted to, but because she was real. No filters, no spotlight requests, just herself. And maybe that's exactly what made her impossible to ignore. But the impact of that viral moment was only just beginning. The next morning, what had once been a lonely little table became the busiest spot in the city. It wasn't just curious onlookers. Teachers saw in Leia the student they'd never been able to help. Nurses with tears in their eyes said she reminded them of their own daughters. Ordinary people, caught up in their busy lives, stopped to form lines that wrapped around the block. They weren't just there to buy cookies, they came to offer respect, hugs, presents. It was as if, suddenly, the world woke up a little more human. There was something beautiful in that quiet reunion with empathy. An elderly man with white hair brought a folding chair and stayed all day helping Leia organize orders. A single mother left flowers and a note, "You gave me strength to keep going." That girl in the worn coat, once invisible, now gathered around her people who had forgotten what true connection felt like. The table became a symbol, but also a temporary home for those who needed to believe kindness still exists in the world. And Leia? She stayed the same. Hair tied back, shy smile, but with a stance that said, "Thank you, but I'm still working." She didn't get dazzled. With every cookie handed out, with every change counted precisely, she kept her focus. This was about helping her mom. And it was precisely that consistency, that maturity amidst the chaos of sudden fame, that moved people. Something much bigger was being built there, and it was far from over. This time, he came alone. No fancy suits, no flashes, no entourage of suited men. Brett Langston walked up to the same table where he had humiliated Leia days before, but now his gaze was different. There was something heavy in his steps, as if each carried the weight of his own conscience. He asked to speak with her privately, in a tone mixing shame and a clumsy attempt at redemption. The crowd went silent. They expected an apology, an offer, maybe a grand gesture. And he tried. He offered help, money, opportunities. Said he wanted to make things right. But Leia, with the same calm she used to silence him the first time, responded firmly, "Help that only comes after the shame isn't help. It's relief for the conscience." The sentence dropped like a stone to the floor. There was no anger, no humiliation. Just a harsh, but fair observation. She refused not out of pride, but because she knew acceptance isn't the same as redemption. And not every gesture needs to be accepted to have value. Brett stood there for a few seconds, motionless. Then he lowered his head and walked away. And even that had an unexpected effect. People began to understand that Leia didn't want fame, applause, or pity. She just wanted to be taken seriously. Her no became a lesson in integrity, and many adults went home reflecting on the times they accepted crumbs just so they wouldn't seem ungrateful. But the story didn't end there. Something even stronger was yet to come. After Brett left, some journalists tried to understand why Leia had refused help. Her answer, given with calm voice and sincere eyes, was deeper than any headline. "He only saw me when the world saw me. I'm not part of his redemption story." That wasn't bitterness. It was clarity. An 11-year-old girl was putting words where many adults would only leave silence or confusion. And again, the world listened. But this time, with more attention. Her words circulated on TV shows, became social media posts, and were debated on podcasts about leadership, empathy, and social justice. It was hard for people to grasp how someone so young could have such a clear view on emotional manipulation, delayed recognition, and self-promotion. But it was simple. Leia knew the weight of being ignored. And anyone who's been invisible once never forgets how much it hurts to be noticed only when it's convenient. She didn't want to be anyone's project. She just wanted to be respected for who she already was. And there lay the greatest lesson. Firmness isn't ingratitude, it's preservation. Leia taught that not all help is pure, and sometimes saying no is the most powerful way to keep your dignity intact. Her maturity didn't just silence billionaires, it quieted the collective urge to turn real stories into emotional trophies. And the more she spoke simply, the more the world listened reverently. But there was one last twist in this story no one had yet imagined. When the online excitement began to fade, a journalist decided to go beyond the likes and shares. He visited the modest home where Leia lived with her mother and found a reality that didn't fit on screens. The electricity was cut off, and the walls told silent stories of overdue bills and unseen sacrifices. There, away from the spotlights, the girl's effort wasn't just about selling cookies, it was about holding hope with her own hands, even when the world seemed to be falling apart. He also discovered the many resumes sent by Leia's mother, ignored for months. Experiences, diplomas, qualifications no one wanted to acknowledge. The mother worked temporary jobs, struggling to keep everything standing, while Leia took on responsibilities that shouldn't weigh on a child. Sleepless nights, cooking, planning, fighting to turn the bare minimum into survival. The viral video showed courage, but it didn't show what courage had to carry. This visit brought up a lesson not everyone wanted to hear. Going viral is a trigger, not a solution. Reality has many shades social media can't capture. And when the attention fades, what remains is the challenge of turning momentary visibility into real change. Leia and her mother knew that better than anyone, and the journey that started there, even after the flashes, was far from over. When her mother tried to convince Leia to accept help, the girl answered with a phrase that echoed like a mantra, "I'd rather work for hope than wait for it." It wasn't just a pretty phrase, it was a silent pact with her own life. Leia made it clear she wasn't seeking favors or charity in disguise, but the chance to be the main character of her own story. And this choice, as simple as it was powerful, showed a strength few adults can sustain. More than that, this attitude resonated beyond the family. It began to awaken genuine solidarity in people, one that's not limited to one-time donations, but that creates real connections. Teachers organized groups to offer extra lessons, neighbors took turns bringing groceries, and even local shopkeepers donated ingredients for the cookies. It was a network growing, not out of obligation, but out of empathy, the kind of empathy born when you recognize another person's worth. Leia, so young, showed that hope isn't a gift, it's a daily construction. And sometimes the biggest revolution starts when someone decides to stop waiting and start acting. This silent courage was far from an isolated act, it was the seed of deep change. And if there's one thing this story will still teach, it's that great transformations grow from small acts, even in the most unexpected places. In the blink of an eye, the unexpected happened. An online campaign created by strangers caught fire like dry tinder, surpassing all expectations. In just 2 days, over $90,000 were raised, turning the girl who barely kept the lights on into a living symbol of resistance and hope. The internet, so often a stage for superficiality, was showing its most powerful side, true solidarity. What had once been a lonely fight now had allies across the entire country. People who had never heard of Leia began to feel a deep connection to her story. After all, who hasn't faced moments when everything seemed to fall apart? That collective feeling became fuel for real transformation. And above all, it showed that small actions, buying a cookie, sharing a video, donating a little, can unleash huge waves of change. And for Leia, who always worked with dignity, this turning point wasn't by chance. It was the sum of courage, truth, and resilience that won not only hearts but opportunities too. Now, the challenge was to turn this fast victory into a sustainable future, a mission that was only beginning there, in front of so many attentive and hopeful eyes. The money made headlines. But the real impact, the change that touched real people, happened far beyond the numbers. Teachers began writing letters saying Leia reminded them why they chose to teach. Children recorded videos holding paper boxes, imitating her courage with a sparkle in their eyes only genuine identification can spark. It was as if suddenly everyone found a piece of themselves in that girl, small in size, immense in meaning. And the movement only grew. A senator posted, "Forget politics. I'd vote for Leia for anything." It was a light phrase but loaded with symbolism. It wasn't about politics, it was about character. People were tired of empty speeches and rehearsed gestures. And when they saw a child being genuine, firm, and fair, they reacted with an emotion money can't buy: recognition. Leia didn't become a celebrity. She became a role model. One that inspires effortlessly, just by being who she is. That story became a collective mirror. Every one of her actions sparked a silent desire in people, the desire to be better, more attentive, more human. It was as if Leia had lit a light that had been off in many hearts. And even those who didn't buy cookies, even those who never met her in person, felt part of something greater. But the journey of someone who inspires so many never ends at the peak. There was still more to be revealed. Brett Langston, once synonymous with success and invincibility in business, was now making headlines for reasons money couldn't erase. The clip of him mocking a child went viral again, but this time under an even harsher spotlight. Investors started pulling away, economic columnists questioned his leadership, and his own stocks plummeted. The arrogance once mistaken for authority was now seen as moral weakness. His empire was trembling. But it wasn't the numbers that shook him most. It was his conscience. Alone, in the silence of a lavish office that suddenly felt too small, he replayed the video, pausing repeatedly at the moment Leia said, "You only saw me when the world saw me." That phrase echoed in his mind like an unbearable noise. For the first time, Brett couldn't use his position to silence the discomfort, because it wasn't external, it was internal. He hadn't just been cruel. He had been blind. And that hurt more than any stock market crash. Even the company's board pressured him to take action and repair his public image. But Brett realized it wasn't about image. It was about truth. And the truth was he was facing a girl who, with a single sentence, had shattered everything he thought made him powerful. The billionaire didn't yet know how to move forward. But he knew his greatest defeat wasn't in the headlines. It was in that calm gaze that disarmed him without raising a voice. In the solitude of an office where billion-dollar decisions were once made, Brett confronted something he never dared face before: his own reflection. For the first time, he didn't see a commanding executive, but a tired and absent man. The images of Leia, with her courage and sparkle in her eyes, awakened a memory that hurt more than any headline: his daughter Sophie, the same age. When was the last time he truly looked at her? The memory was vivid and cruel. Forgotten birthdays, unseen drawings, hugs replaced by meetings. Brett always justified himself by saying he worked to give his daughter the best. But what's the value of the best when the essential is missing? He realized that by ignoring Leia, he wasn't just being insensitive to any child. He was unconsciously projecting the same neglect he had imposed on his own daughter. The arrogance he showed toward the girl was just a mirror of an old guilt, now hurting more than ever. That's when he made a decision no press release or board meeting could contain: to be a father. Not a father of appearances, but of presence. For the first time, he didn't send flowers or gifts. He picked up the phone, called Sophie, and asked to see her. He didn't know how to reclaim lost time, but he knew he had to start. Because deep down, Leia hadn't just awakened his social conscience. She had woken up a father sleeping inside a powerful man. And that was the beginning of everything. 3 days later, a plain car parked quietly outside Hope House. No journalists, no security, no logos. Just a man in a simple suit, holding a briefcase and a different look in his eyes. Brett Langston entered the shelter without announcing who he was. He walked down the halls like someone seeing for the first time. He saw beds lined with worn blankets, heard children's laughter, and felt, for the first time in years, that he was in a place where people's worth wasn't measured by numbers. In silence, he delivered what no one expected. A new industrial kitchen for the dining hall, digital education equipment, art workshop supplies, and full scholarships for the shelter's youth. Among the names on the list was Kira, a quiet teenager many called difficult, but who dreamed of studying architecture. Until that day, no one had asked what she wanted from life. Seeing her name on that list, Kira didn't cry. She just smiled for the first time in weeks, and that smile said it all. Brett didn't expect recognition. He left as quietly as he came. But something inside him had changed. He realized that by touching lives without seeking applause, he was also rebuilding his own. And Kira, given the chance to study, wouldn't just change her own fate, but inspire other girls to believe someone, somewhere, still cared. Sometimes, the deepest transformations don't start with speeches, but with unseen acts by those who have finally learned to look. At graduation, Leia stepped onto the stage with the same shy smile but now carried a different stance. Firm, serene, aware of the strength she held. The auditorium was full. Parents, teachers, and classmates waited for the speech from the girl who had become a symbol of something greater. Leia didn't talk about sales or fame. Instead, she spoke of belonging. About how for so long, she thought she had no place. And how everything changed the day she dared to raise her voice, even when scared. Among her thanks, Leia surprised the audience by mentioning Brett Langston. That man who laughed at me also taught me something. He gave me the courage to keep speaking, even when no one wanted to listen. The room fell silent. It was a mature gesture that moved even the skeptics. Her speech wasn't about revenge, but about transformation. She showed that mockery can fuel strength, and that a steady voice from a pure heart can break any barrier. At the end of the speech, the audience gave a standing ovation. Not out of charity, but out of recognition. With her simple words, Leia gave voice to a generation raised hearing they weren't enough. Her example crossed school walls, offices, and homes. She didn't just win a cookie-selling challenge, she paved the way for others to feel worthy of dreaming, fighting, and belonging. Her voice, once small and ignored, now echoed, strong, clear, and impossible to silence. On an ordinary afternoon, as Leia set up her small cookie stand in front of the school, a car parked across the street. No photographers, no security, no tie. Brett Langston crossed the sidewalk with hesitant steps. The former magnate now looked like a man trying to make things right. He bought a box of cookies, not as a symbol of support, but as an excuse. In a low voice, he started a conversation that took too long to happen. I failed, my daughter, myself, and you. He didn't seek applause or easy forgiveness. He spoke about Sophie, his absence, the emptiness no number or stock market move could fill. Leia listened closely. Her young eyes had already seen more than many see in a lifetime, and she answered with the same frankness that once unsettled him. It's not about the cookies, Mr. Langston. It never was. It's about being, really being. Not when it's easy, but when it matters. That conversation, without audience or flashes, meant more than any business conference. Brett smiled, genuinely touched, as if something inside him had finally found rest. He thanked her, this time from the heart, and left with a respectful handshake. As he walked away, he left behind more than money. He left a new version of himself. And Leia, with her chocolate-stained apron, stayed there, not as a symbol of success, but as a beacon of presence, truth, and change. Sophie was in her room when her father gently knocked on the door, holding a box of cookies with Leia scribbled on it. He said little, just handed it over and sat on the floor beside her bed. For the first time, Brett didn't try to buy his daughter's affection with expensive gifts. He simply showed up. He stayed there in silence, letting time and truth do their work. Days later, he stood in the school theater audience, eyes misty, applauding Sophie's small role as a tree in the school musical. He didn't make a speech or seek attention. He was simply present, from start to finish. At home, he left a handwritten letter on his daughter's desk. No logos, no fancy cards, just words. Words about regret, absence, and a sincere desire to relearn how to be a father. Sophie read it slowly, more than once. She didn't rush to hug him or say everything was forgiven. But she kept the letter by her bedside instead of throwing it away. At the next dinner, she invited him to sit at the table. It was a beginning. Quiet. Slow. But genuine. In those small gestures, Brett wasn't just reclaiming his daughter's love, he was relearning how to love. Not as a victorious executive, but as a man willing to be different. No press conferences, no corporate seals, no golden nameplates. Brett transferred a generous sum to create an anonymous fund to support young people like Leia, forgotten voices who just need someone to listen. He no longer wanted applause. He wanted to be part of change without the world knowing. He wanted to heal without needing recognition. Every month, Hope House receives discreet boxes. Inside are books, laptops, musical instruments, and sometimes just notes. No official signatures. Just a simple phrase, from someone who learned to listen. The children don't know who sends them, but they wait eagerly. Each box is like a hug from someone who never appears, but always cares. Brett's legacy was no longer in buildings, headlines, or stock trades. It was in the small transformations born from quiet care. In the opportunities given to those no one noticed. He no longer needed to be remembered. Because for the first time, what he did truly mattered, even if no one knew it was him. One quiet afternoon, with the sun setting behind the school, Leia held in her hands the last box of cookies she had left. It wasn't a relic of glory or a reminder of victory. It was a symbol of something deeper. Empathy, choice, a journey that transformed pain into compassion. She didn't keep it for herself. She placed it where everyone could see, knowing that someone else would need it more than she did. It's for when someone loses faith in themselves and the world, Leia told a friend. The box doesn't heal, but it can remind you that someone else was once at rock bottom and climbed back up. It was no longer about cookies. It was about an emotional legacy. About how small acts, wrapped in sincerity, can light up places that once seemed too dark. In that simple room, with peeling walls and dreams stitched by hand, Leia understood that true power wasn't in applause, but in being a bridge. The last box didn't mark an end, it marked a new beginning. Not for her, but for those who would come after. Because sometimes, all someone needs, is to know that someone else has been there, and survived with love. The sky over Washington, D.C. seemed wider that day. Leia and her friends, once invisible to the system, now stood before the Capitol, carrying simple backpacks, worn shoes, and a handmade sign, "We belong too." There were no reporters, no official speeches. Just a group of young people smiling with the kind of joy that comes from the improbable, arriving where they were told they would never set foot. A curious tourist asked what the visit meant. Without rehearsals or spokespeople, Leia calmly looked at the sign and replied, "It means someone thought we were worth the effort." She didn't speak of politics or charity. She spoke of presence. Because being there, even for a moment, was a reminder to the world that they existed. That they also dreamed, fought, and belonged. As the group walked away from the imposing building, Leia glanced back one last time. Not with reverence, but with dignity. She knew real change wasn't in marble walls, but in hearts that finally began to believe they had a place in the world. And that day, with her entire story behind her, Leia wrote her own, a story of courage, belonging, and love that no one could erase.